Well, thanks for the intro. A lot of these are already touched on. I'm responsible for engineering and product. I've been there for 8 years now. We have a cross-functional engineering product marketing pod system. A lot of people call those tribes, squads. Everyone has their own flavor of it. Tech stack-wise, we have React and Redux on the front end. There's a GraphQL orchestration layer above that, and then there's Node and Ruby services behind the scenes. And we migrated to Kubernetes a little bit over a year ago. OK, so I'm talking about continuous delivery. And I must say, it's very humbling to be talking about something where the inventor of the topic is sitting in the audience. So this quote, there's Jez waving. It's the ability to get changes of all types into production, into the hands of users, safely, quickly, and in a sustainable way. And here are some of Jez's books. If you haven't read these, I highly recommend them. We actually read DevOps Handbook as a team to sort of act as the catalyst on this continuous delivery journey. And then Accelerate's the newest book, and it's great for any engineering or product leader. I highly recommend it. It's the best professional book I've read in the last 3 years. OK, so I'm talking about Misadventures today. And the reason why I want to do this is because there are a lot of great resources out there for what's the great blueprint for continuous delivery. What technology needs to be in place? What should your processes look like? What kind of cultural buy-in do you need? But I don't hear a lot of people talking about it at the front line. I don't hear a very practical discussion around, hey, let's say you can't implement a new blueprint from scratch with a small team. And let's say that you're not at some huge organization where all of this is already in place at scale. And so that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about all of our mistakes along the way. So try not to judge us, because there's some pretty egregious mistakes, and the learnings that generated and how that informed our journey. OK, so how many people here work in e-commerce? OK, so a fair amount. So for all of you that do not work in e-commerce, let me tell you about the joy that is our lives come late November, and it's called Cyber Week. And by joy, I mean is the hell that is our lives. It's this magical time period where marketing concocts all these different permutations, and then we're on the hook for making them happen on site and app and email, push notification, everything. And as you can see, by day it changes. By platform it changes. We also segment based off some of our ML scores. And you can imagine what it's like to be an engineer who's responsible for making this happen. There's this train coming. It's the promotion. You're that guy on the front of it. You're trying everything in your power to keep the train going. And if something goes wrong, don't even bother trying to fix it. Just get it out of the way so we can keep collecting money. And it was so bad that we started to implement code freezes around this time of year. Thought process was, hey, it's crazy enough as is. It's already stressful for this engineer. The last thing we need is more, conflicts to deal with, more, variables in the equation. So we started doing code freezes. And this was actually one of the first kind of symptoms that we noticed, which was we stopped shipping code for 2 weeks out of the year. I know other companies do it in December as well for Christmas, but for us, Cyber Week's our biggest time period. But we'll come back to this. So we had a very mature way to decide what engineer had the honor of running all of those promotional treatments. We drew straws. And you're probably thinking to yourself, it can't be that hard, right? It's just some front-end work, and maybe your mobile apps have to pull in from some APIs, you have to pump some data to email. But around this time, our deploy pipeline wasn't exactly in top shape. It looked like this. You'd start the process. You start to pull some code down from the server. Hopefully, you start to compile some assets out of this process. Ideally, an artifact comes out of it. Then you're going to kick that off to S3. And then, hey, if the load balancer looks good, you start letting the customers in. And it was actually all the things you shouldn't be doing. It wasn't quick. It didn't gracefully degrade. Sometimes it rolled back, depending on if it failed at some point in the process. But because of all of this, it wasn't sustainable, and engineers didn't have confidence when they deployed. And that was a big issue for us. But we got really lucky, because 2 years ago, the engineer who drew that short straw was our laziest and most clever engineer. And to quote Bill Gates, I choose a lazy person to do a hard job because a lazy person will find an easy way to do it. And what this engineer did, we actually integrated with Split. I wasn't going to say Split earlier, but I'll just say it. We integrated with Split a little bit over 2 years ago. And this engineer realized, hey, we can pump in all of our ML data Split. We can have all of our clients pass along information about the user, how many orders they've purchased. And then using our feature flagging system, we were able to run the entire Cyber Week without one single deploy. And this was great. And we actually still use this for sales. We actually use it for a number of things nowadays, for all of our features, for all of our even system migrations. But this was actually another symptom, which was engineers didn't want to go through like our common delivery mechanism to do the tasks they needed to do. So they were developing workarounds. And we needed to fix this. So around this time, we invested the CIO pipeline. This is when we started migrating to Kubernetes. It was in great shape, but technology is only one piece to continuous delivery. And so at this point, we were just kind of partially the way there. So we were able to get changes into production safely and quickly. But as you can imagine, we had some more learnings to encounter. So we did this like super small and easy effort called decomposing a monolith. I'm not sure if any other engineers done this before, but it's not easy. It's not small. This actually took us years to do. And we did a ton of testing and staging and these dry runs. And we had these meetings to figure out like what were all the steps for the deploy. And then like on launch day, we figured it would be something like this. Like we have all these different leads and they're starting to chime in and they're going to give you these status updates as to like how the deploy is going. And, there's someone like me who's kind of overseeing it and making sure we're good to go. And then somewhere around the end, we're like, hey, yeah, like the launch went great. We're good to go. In reality, it went something like this. And as you can imagine, this does not end well. So the problem was we had an engineer who was doing some profiling of how long one of the biggest operations is going to take in staging. And we had about 200 million records in staging, took 3 minutes, and in production it was closer to about 2 billion records. So they said like, yeah, should be about 30 minutes for this portion of this system migration. And I see someone shaking their head already. Anyone who's worked with like large scale MySQL databases knows that like operations like that don't scale in like a linear fashion. So at around 3 hours, we had to like stop and kill that process and then try to find a new way forward with this system migration. And this is when we realized like, hey, like we cannot work like this anymore. It's a multi-year track for us to kind of decompose this monolith and move to distributed systems. And we needed a much better way to work to be able for like this to all be sustainable. So, for us, it was like, hey, staging and production, sometimes they're the same, but when they're not, it's usually painful. For every 10 minutes website's down, we're losing tens of thousands of dollars because we're in e-commerce. And so for us, like at that 3 hour mark, I'm starting to get pretty stressed out because there's a lot of risk for the business. I don't even know when the site's going to come back online. And if I'm getting stressed, most likely the team's getting stressed, and that's a recipe for burnout, and we don't want that to happen. And then, yeah, I think just like doing all that extra testing and QA just elongates the entire development process. So this was kind of like the next symptom that we needed to reflect on how we thought about and how we were practicing continuous delivery. Large system migrations for us were stressful. And so how do we fix this? So in theory, when a team's small, this is how we used to work. And it like sounds great. You branch off, you work on this feature. When it's good to go, you merge in, and then like, yeah, everything's done. In reality, it looks a lot more like this. You branch off. It's a lot longer than what you thought it was going to be. At some point, you want to rebase off master, and it's aptly described here as hell, which it is when you have 20, 30 engineers who've all been contributing to master in the meantime. And then you get some feedback, and then you do some more fixing, more feedback, and maybe it gets into production. And so what we ended up doing is we went here, and this looks a little utopian, but the reality is like we changed the way we worked. So instead of like going off in isolation and working on a feature, we started to like break that feature into all these subcomponents. And it didn't even have to be user-facing changes. It could just be 100 lines of code towards that feature. And that's a lot easier to get through code review, and then it's a lot easier just to go into master, and we use feature flagging just to hide it. But what it did for us is by the time we wanted to launch that feature, we had been using it in production for weeks. We had a lot of confidence. In the past, we wanted to turn the feature on, we'd schedule like a war room and like the no deploys on Fridays. Like we'd only do it like a Monday or Tuesday. And now like we had so much confidence, like, yeah, sure, go to 10, 20% the first day, 50% the next day, and then 100% soon after. And so for us, like this was kind of the game changer. This also like brought engineering and product closer together. That they were in the loop faster, they gave us feedback faster. It really changed our velocity. And speaking of that, I used to think that these were mutually exclusive, that you couldn't have speed and have stability, but it depends on how you work. And you definitely can have this. And our CEO, when we were small, when we were starting to scale, he was like, hey, we have to keep moving as fast. Like that's our competitive edge, we need to keep it. And it was like, okay, well, you're the person who's saying, it's really bad when the site's down. It's really bad when we have bugs. Like, how can we do both? And if you change the way you work, it is possible. Okay, so at this point, we were able to get everything, including new features, into production, into users' hands, safely, quickly, and sustainable way. But as you can notice, there's still one more learning to be had. This is very recent, and this was like my mistake, so it's actually very close to home. This happened in July. We had this huge press launch. Our PR team, marketing team, were working for weeks for this like big buildup. It was the Real Housewives of New York City. We were going to get their clothes, sell them on their behalf, give the proceeds to charity. About 10 minutes ago, we got a request, and it was like, hey, we want to change one line. And it's like, okay, one line changed, engineer makes it, we merge it in, test suite passes, it goes live, and I click on the URL, and it's broken. And I'm not sure if you've ever been in this situation, but like your head starts to race, and you're like, hey, like what are like all my options here? Can I like hot fix this? Like, like what can I possibly do? And in my head, I'm like, oh, it's easy. Like we'll just roll it back, like no problem. So we had moved to Kubernetes, and I actually hadn't rolled back on Kubernetes before. And the one other engineer that was there, he hadn't done it either. And so it was this very humbling moment where we had to say, like, okay, just revert it, get it into the pipeline. When it gets live, it gets live. It ended up going live about, I think it was about 6:15 when it finally went live, and we lost about 85% of the traffic of that initial press wave. So yeah. Ouch. And I was like, okay, like what's going on here? Like there has to be this learning for me. And it was, we have devs that don't ops. And that was including me. That was including this engineer as a part of our onboarding. Like our infrastructure team empowers us to be able to deploy applications, roll them back, spin up new ones, scale. But you need to be able to evangelize all of that so everyone has that at their disposal. And we weren't doing that. And I try to think take one more step back and say, like, okay, like, well, how did it come to this? And the reality was I became complacent. The CEO is happy. The CTO is happy. Our product team, they were all very happy with how we were working. And it was a long, multi-year journey. But the reality of it was we had become satisfied and we weren't evolving. And this quote actually is from Accelerate, from Jez's book, and I firmly believe in it. The most important characteristic of high-performing teams is that they are never satisfied. They always strive to get better. So what I would leave you with is, continuous delivery is this like living organism, and you need to adapt it to your surroundings. And that can be when you hire new engineers, that can be when the business changes, when your customers change. But if you're not constantly trying to evolve it, you're falling behind. So try to stay honest to yourself, and I would definitely recommend reading Jez's book if you care about this. Thank you.